When I was a kid, I spent so many hours just staring at the stars and not knowing where I was in the world and where humanity was in the world. After spending countless hours of just looking and learning and trying to understand, I said, why don't I turn that back onto my own planet? Understand how humanity fits within its own spectrum, sits within its own planet, and understands how we can act for the future. If we take a scan across the U.S. and we look at what differentiates different environmental justice communities and really how we're impacted from the climate crisis, we see that nature access is one of the biggest impacts that we see. When we take a look at surface temperature, it's inversely proportional to nature canopy. But if we look at indicators across race and income, they are directly proportional. And if we see that correlation, what does that mean about how we got here to this day? If we look at communities across Louisiana, Ohio, anywhere, even across the world, we see the same patterns roughly. Race and income also equal a map of tree canopy cover. So if we take a look at that, we can hear from leaders across the movement who echo that sentiment quite completely. And I want to take a look here where we can see Baltimore here. We can see Portland, Oregon. We can see Ohio. We can see Texas, all showing that tree canopy cover is something that really differentiates us when it comes to urban spaces. And trees aren't important because they serve so many purposes. When it comes to a community without access to tree canopy cover, they're 3 to 5 degrees more exposed to extreme heat. They're also more exposed to the lethal humidity, the wet bulb effect. They also are much more vulnerable to rising tides because of that lack of access to mangroves and other species which protect. And that's what's so important here is that I want to talk about why that happens. And if we go all the way back to the 1930s, in 1934, there was a bill which was put forth that created that Black and brown communities were deemed as Class D neighborhoods, as considered hazardous and undesirable. So real estate investment did not go in those neighborhoods. And it created a spiral effect where these communities' land value, when it comes to green neighborhoods versus yellow neighborhoods versus red neighborhoods, we see now, decades later, that homes are 10 times more the price. Homes are multitudes more impacted by particulate matter. And homes are also more vulnerable to the socioeconomic indicators that says if a company wants to go and build a highway through your neighborhood, if they want to build a petrochemical factory, that company will come to your neighborhood first because they see it as a path of least resistance. That is something that tree equity can solve, is that we can go back to the drawing table and the foundations and say, well, if we want to combat the vestiges of systemic racism, it comes down to making sure that we invest in home prices by planting trees in neighborhoods where we know that planting a tree raises the home value. It goes to making sure kids feel safe going outside. A lot of adults, and my parents quite specifically, they always say, why don't you go outside and play? But if we look at what outside looks like, it's not what generations in the past got to experience. We go to our phones because there's no other access, there's no other source of play. And I think that is what's another power of tree equity is that it allows us to feel more connected to our neighbors, more connected to our friends, and decoupled from the spiral that is the digital world. And I want to take a second to also really take into account how do we get away from this? This doesn't have to be the reality. In countries across the world, yes, income mirrors the lack of access to nature, but what that really shows is that there's an opportunity to invest in these communities because communities don't inherently have lack of access to nature. It's because it's not prioritized, it's not taught to young people about the importance of it, and it's not really known about for any young person that wants to get into the field. We should see urban forestry as one of the jobs of the future because it is. It is incredibly important because we see that from 1940 to 2022, these communities look quite similar. But in the past 4 years of investment, we've seen $1.5 billion put into urban and community forestry. And that is because of the direct involvement and advocacy of people in this room and across this country who have said climate action is important. But what we've seen is that tree equity cover has increased, percentage by percentage, and that health outcomes increase, that life expectancy increases. You wouldn't think that planting a tree in a neighborhood would increase someone's life expectancy. We can take a look by seeing just some of the key kind of positive benefits that a tree brings. It can relieve psychological stress for young people who every time we go into nature, nature seems like something that's fleeting. We see it encourages activities. We see that it does a multitude of these things which allows us to feel that a city doesn't just have to be a place for human diversity, but it can be a place of biodiversity. And that's what's really important, is that in order for humanity to survive, we have to think about diversity in a much more expansive way. I want to show here as a sort of case study around the impact that trees in cities without trees have, and that we show just the exorbitant impact it has. And this is something that we can really cite to put pressure on elected officials, put pressure on our local place-based organizations to say, hey, how can we support you? How can me as a person who knows about this issue now, how can I help? And what's powerful is that we can see that when we find out of an issue, we move from this lever of apathy to awareness. We don't know about a crisis, so we're in a state of blissful ignorance, which is great for some, but for most of us, change has to happen. And what happens is now we're aware. We want to get more involved. We want to figure out how we can connect with our communities. And that action starts from one person taking one step. For me, I was in high school at Washington Leadership Academy, and my science teacher, when I was 16 years old, told me about an opportunity at Smithsonian where I could basically sign up to testify at the D.C. Council to pass the Clean Energy D.C. Act. And for 7 hours, we sat there, and we're like, all these fossil fuel companies are testifying against us. There's no way they're going to listen to a few young people telling their story. And after 7 hours, the D.C. Council went from almost not supporting it at all to being 50-50. They were like, so let's come back tomorrow. Let's hear from some more young people. I skipped school for a day, and I said, let's get more young people out here. Let's get more adults out here to support, community members, all telling their story. And from that, they passed the bill unanimously, and has now become the most aggressive decarbonization bill in the country. Washington, D.C. being a leading city in the world on sustainability. And from that, I was like, let's keep going, let's keep pushing. This shows the power of people. So within the next year, I went back to my school, went back to my community and said, what next can we do? What opportunities can we take advantage of? And growing up in Washington, D.C., there's plenty of opportunities to intern for elected officials. So I had interned for Congressman John Lewis from age of 17 to age of 18, and it was an incredible pleasure of my life. And from that, I was able to work on climate economic bills. We were able to figure out how we can reverse the kind of stock buybacks that is the predominant driver of our economy to reinvest in communities and reinvest in climate solutions. And after that, I was like, let's keep on going. Let's keep on organizing. So we started climate striking, organizing every single Friday from 3 people to 10 people to thousands of people to tens of thousands of people to New York City having hundreds of thousands go out in the streets and put society at a halt. And we're able to have a final conversation where we said, what does our society value most? Does it value profit over people? Does it value pollution over their children? Or does it value our future first and foremost? And from that conversation, we're able to say, every presidential candidate, every political official, every economic official should come to us and sit at the table and understand what their priorities should be. So from the many conversations we had at every presidential stop, we went to them and said, you need to center climate justice. So we went to every company we knew and had contacts with. We were like, you should center climate and economic justice. And we heard back from the Biden administration in March of 2021, and I got a phone call. And they said, we'd like you to join the first ever White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. And for the past 3 years, I've had the honor of serving in this council to work on solving issues around climate justice, solving issues around tree inequity, and advancing racial justice. One of the tools that we created was the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, where we use many different indicators across communities, studying linguistics, studying access to resources in the climate space, access to travel, transportation, infrastructure, all these indicators to create a tool where they can prioritize where climate investment should go, and to make sure that communities are no longer left behind, and they're not left for decades behind. Some communities for 70 years asking to have a seat at the table. This is the start of a new era, where we said everyone has equal playing foot, because oftentimes they're not even thought about. So now, with the Justice 40 initiative, 40% of investment benefits go to frontline communities, and ensures that all of the funding that have been hard-fought for many years, 40% of that goes to communities that are impacted first and worst by the climate crisis. But my role in that, I was a kid who had been working with an organization called American Forest, who was trying to advocate for environmental justice and tree equity. And what we saw was they created the tree equity score tool, which was directly implemented in the climate and economic justice screening tool. And from that, we've seen multitudes of youth summits that have been organized across this country to advocate for tree equity. We've seen tree plantings be prioritized in communities of need, because this score basically, the tree equity score, takes into account income, takes into account race, takes into account the percentage of trees that have been planted. But what happens is that correlates that and creates local analyzers. From those local analyzers, we're able to send recommendations to communities with a community action guide so that they can know what to do next, how to build coalitions, how to reach out to their neighbors, and organize around real climate action. Because what's powerful about planting trees as one of the actions to take place first is that the narrative around climate change for so long has been that system change is the thing that motivates us. But for young people, system change isn't enough. It has to be both and. It has to be personal change, it has to be community change, local action. And if you're able to plant a tree in your backyard, and you're able to see that your community changes for the better, and that you were the person that did that, you used the tree equity score, you organized the community, you organized an event, and you saw your community change, because now your grandchildren, someone who's 5 years old playing on the street in 2100, might be able to see that same tree that you planted. That's what change really looks like, is that you can point to where you were a part of that systemic and transformative action that we're seeing all across our country and the world. And I see that as where everyone can get involved. Even if it's not tree equity, using your passion within your industry to know that you are a force for change, and that you're only one action away from being able to impact the world. For me, I was a 16-year-old kid who wanted to code and learn about how to bring virtuality to the world. And for all of that, I was like, I don't know what I can do. But I did one thing at a time, one step at a time, and I got to where I am today. That kid would not recognize anything that I would be doing right now. And I'm sure all the other activists around the world wouldn't recognize what they're doing right now. But it's because it has to happen. And we have to step up to really present that sense of moral clarity when we talk about the climate crisis and about all social justice issues. Because it's not a gray area whether we should stand on the side of green energy and green investment and green future, or we should stand on the side of pollution and extraction. That's the choice we have ahead of us. And for me, I am a young African-American man, so my ancestry is oftentimes shrouded in the history of slavery. So for me, I drive my kind of sense of self in knowing that I exist as a part of the earth, and that the earth exists as a part of me. And I hope that is something that you all can take away as well, is that we aren't just from the communities that we come from, we aren't just of the heritage that we see within ourselves, but we're of the common human heritage, that this planet belongs to us. Now, if we really want to change it, we have to take care of it. If we think about the earth as the Garden of Eden, we're standing in it, but we're reaching for that forbidden fruit. But we have to make the conscious decision to protect it and to look after it for the generations to come and the generations that are here now. Thank you.